Really? Basically nothing, yeah.
Oh, it's the same old soup warmed over.
Yeah, they're a bunch of
Same song. Yeah. How about you? You do anything exciting? Last time I saw you. When's your dog park?
23 grand on this.
You got a good seat.
Pen store?
Yeah, we did. We brought one.
We know that.
we're both the kids.
All over the world. It's doing.
Oh, I guess they come up with something.
Oh yeah, I'm feel every.
Oh, my neighbor went with their foster adopt daughter, and he was just red-faced. I said, I wish I could have been with it. It would have been better than not being there. I have too many things in front of me tonight.
That makes it go a little bit longer when you don't have to go bumper. Yeah.
Well,
You get to grade it.
I thought that was kind of funny. I thought, well, good thing he has a really good he couldn't be in a position to be actually show
See,
for a
you see
little
him,
while.
you see him jump off the stage and start running down the road.
He's got people and they have it under control. But I thought
which
that.
one was your, the Grand Marshals Award went to the Sizzler, which was that drill team towards the beginning of the parade. And the drummers were like, marching through. I thought they won best parade.
Cool.
So they took mine, the Grand Marshals, nothing but ribbon. They don't get anything. They got money.
That's
That
good.
was, yeah. I remember watching it. It was really impressive. They were very in sync too for as many drums as yeah. Good performance.
I have a job tonight. That's why I'm dressed.
Nobody wants him to do that. You get to read this letter.
Will we get much out of it? A lot of it. The state's done, yeah.
Going in further, we would also
Call this meeting to order. City of North Kansas City, Missouri, regular council meeting, March 19th, 2019. Could we have a moment of silence? Mr. Fraser? Can we have comments from the public? State your name and address. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, my name's George Schluter. My wife and I, on February 1, purchased a house at 800 East 23rd Avenue. I'm a past president of the Home Builders Association of Greater Kansas City. I'm a past chairman of the National Association of Home Builders Construction Codes and Standards Committee, and currently the chairman of our Kansas City HBA Code Review Task Force. 2 weeks ago, you all passed your building code ordinance number 9176 without very many amendments or modifications to it, and without the opportunity for the input of the HBA of Kansas City, Missouri. We would like to have the opportunity to review that. I want to give you a few examples of some of the things that you've created by it. I'll give you 3 of them. This is the code book. Pretty ridiculously big, huge. It has 777 pages plus reference standards and appendices. That IRC book governs residential construction, new and remodeling. But there's 3 parts in it, at least I want to mention to you tonight. In Chapter 3, you all should allow the use of I-joists without requiring the need for gypsum board for underneath covering. Both the city of Kansas City, Missouri and the city of Overland Park, which are the 2 largest permitting cities, do allow that. If this is not changed, a builder and or someone remodeling their house will be faced with a $1,700 to $2,000 additional cost. In Chapter 11, the energy section, there has been a comprehensive work among all the code officials in the metropolitan area and the Home Builders Association to have a modified version of this chapter. With it, there's about a $1,700 to $2,000 savings by adopting these amendments or modifications to what's in the 18 code. It does not affect life safety. It does not affect the safety of the house, but it reduces some of the requirements that have gotten into the codes over the year. In Chapter 34, 35, and 36, which deal with electrical, we ask that modify that to take out some of the requirements for GFCI and ICART detectors, which potentially could save a person $2,100. If your city wants to have a growth in your remodeling, you need to have codes that are workable, fair, affordable, and what you have today is not that way. I ask you that you would rescind the ordinance that you passed 2 weeks ago and allow us to work with your building officials and your community development director to bring back proposed good codes that would be affordable, reasonable, and safe for the public. Thank you.
Eric?
Thank you, sir. We appreciate Mr. Schluter's remarks. We did receive a letter from Mr. Schluter, and I'm sorry that he feels that we might not have kept some promises that were made. I will review that and let you know my assessment. With regard to the Home Builders Association's proposed amendment, you deserve as well to hear their perspective, as well as staff's recommendations regarding their recommendations. And so what we would like to do is to bring those to you, hopefully at your next meeting, certainly if not at your next meeting, then the one after that, so that we can go into those in some detail, and Mr. Schluter will, of course, have the opportunity to also speak to them. And we would also like to express our view. The Home Builders Association is going to have a different perspective on these building codes than the city staff will at times. We have different missions and different constituencies, so it's natural that at times we might have some disagreements. And my understanding is we did consider these, but we did not eventually propose them as local amendments to the large code that you did adopt. But we will bring those to you for your further consideration. You also have on tonight's agenda an item that is related to this ordinance that you did pass 2 weeks ago, and that's item 8 on your agenda, amendment to City Code at Title 15, Buildings and Construction, chapters 15.08 and 15.30. In all honesty, these really do not have anything to do with the issues that Mr. Schluter brought before you tonight, so we wouldn't see any issue with your adopting these rather technical amendments that we discovered really needed to be made after you had adopted the ordinance last time. On the other hand, if you'd prefer to defer this ordinance until a future meeting, we don't see any damage in that either. This ordinance that we had before you was to take effect 46 days from today, and the reason for 46 is that the last ordinance you passed 2 weeks ago had a 60-day period of implementation, and Mr. Schluter has indicated in his letter that he would have preferred a 90-day. So we will bring all of those issues to you at a future meeting. We'll be sure to communicate with Mr. Schluter about what we're doing and when, and that would be our recommendation for proceeding at this point.
Can I pull number 8 off of the agenda?
If you like, sir, yes, sir, we would have no problem with that.
Well, that sounds good.
Yeah, that sounds
That's
good.
fine.
That sounds good. Let's do them all at one time.
get it all taken care of at one time. It's only fair to Mr. Schlitter and
For future reference, I did have a question on number 8, the fire area. What is the fire area? They were talking about square footage. I know we're going to pull it. Is that something that can be explained rather quickly?
Mr. Harris, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, Councilman. A fire area, if you can consider occupancy or a room, one room has sometimes a requirement that in the event of an emergency or a fire, that area they can exit safely. Then there are some dissimilar type of occupancies that might be next to that same occupancy, which would be considered a totally different fire area. And so there's requirements that has to be considered when we're dealing with different occupancies and
Okay. Different situations and different locations.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, consent agenda.
I move the consent agenda be approved as presented.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Number 7.
Short-term conditional use permit, extension of closure of Howe Street.
Eric?
Thanks, sir. On November 6, 2018, the City Council approved a short-term conditional use permit requested by the North Kansas City School District to close Howe Street to vehicular traffic between 23rd and 25th Avenues. This permit expires at the end of March. In its letter that's in your packet dated March 8th, the school district is requesting permission to extend the closure through 2019 under the same conditions as you approved before. At this point, I'd like to ask Dr. Tim Gallagher of the North Kansas City School District to come forward and explain a little bit further why the school district is making this request.
Good evening. As you know, our winter was a much harder delaying event than we would have liked to have had. That is the main impetus for asking for the extension on Howe. The other reason, though, is we pretty much have this Old Main gutted, and we are trying to do everything we can to make sure that we're bringing everything up to current standards in terms of building and structural. That's going to take a little bit more time. I just received an email while I was sitting down with a proposed solution to one of the major problems that we had come across, and I think everyone's going to be happy with that internally in our conversations. With Howe being closed the way it is, it does provide a great safe way for kids to move through that area. Old Main, though, is not going to be ready for the library to open and everything else by October 1, by October 31st. It's really going to be pushed off into the fall. Wing A, though, that should be ready to go in August. And I'm telling you that because what we'll have to do still is use some of our existing areas and buildings to handle classrooms for those kids until we can get them all over there, because our goal is to have a closed campus, have everyone there, and you don't have the hordes crossing the street all through the day. The other benefit is that for the buses, as soon as we can get that alley open and cleared of construction, that's where we're going to load up our kids and drop our kids off. So we won't even have buses on Howe doing what they're doing right now. That should take place long before the end of the 19 calendar year. And I'm sure you probably have some other questions. I'd be happy to answer that. I just don't want to ramble on with things that maybe you're not concerned with.
Okay. So Wing 1, that is the auditorium on the south side.
Correct. It's an auditorium, but it also has a lot of classrooms that are in there, yes.
And so when you get that open, will that then become the main entrance into the school?
Yes, there's a link there. There's going to be a command center for security that's in that link that's right about where Old Main and the link hit to take you over to Wing A.
Thank
you. Well, I know that, you guys have faced some challenges with the construction and around the surrounding neighborhood. The main thing is safety for everyone, for the students, for the construction workers. So, I think a lot of people have come used to that closure for right now and just till the end of this year. Hopefully, everything will be back to normal after that. So I don't have a problem with extending the closure.
Mayor. I don't either. I've driven that area numerous times since this happened, and it seems like everything works perfectly well for what we had intended to do. I don't know whether the Chief of Police has any comments on it or not. I'm perfectly happy with it happening the way it's doing.
to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Oh, hold on just a minute. We have a little something for, our lady council person is recognizing some ladies that you've got. So, go ahead, Rita.
Let me do it just from here so you can hear it. Proclamation. Whereas the North Kansas City Lady Hornets basketball team is led by head coach Jeff Lacey, assistant coaches Joel Peace, John West, Joe Barton, Missy Doolin, Dylan West, trainer Katie McEwen, and managers Kelsey Weldon and Ania Matthews. And whereas the Lady Hornets team roster consists of Jemiah Powell Smith, Kennedy Washington, Chandler Prater, Sharon Thompson, Jaylena Kelsey, Lovey Mayfield, LaJonda Boylan, Azela Copeland, Arenia Rogers, Mackenzie Callaway, Mary Kate Rakin, Hannah Porras, Chloe Tays, Angel Lee, and Leah McCullough. And whereas the Lady Hornets played a total of 31 games this season with a record of 29-2, and whereas the Lady Hornets won its first girls basketball state championship in program history with a 43-34 win against Jefferson City in the Class 5 title game on March 16, 2019, and whereas the Lady Hornets team GPA this year was 3.49, and whereas the team's roster consists of 7 seniors, all of which will be attending college next year, with 4 seniors playing basketball at the collegiate level. And whereas Lady Hornets won the NAIA Champions of Character Award this year, a Casey Metro Award for off-the-court accomplishments. And whereas it is fitting that the city recognize the coaches, the team captains, and the entire team for their outstanding performance, and it is fitting to also recognize the school district, teachers, and the entire community for supporting the North Kansas City Lady Hornets. Now, I therefore, Don Stilo, Mayor of the City of North Kansas City, do hereby recognize the North Kansas City Lady Hornets basketball team for achieving victory in the state championship game.
They'll be in the trophy case, hopefully.
That'll be so cool.
You guys want to kind of bunch up a little bit? Sorry. It's not every day that you win a state championship.
I wore my sweatshirt for this event.
Okay, ready? 1, 2,
Smile.
3. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, I'll bet nobody can guess why I didn't want to read that. Okay.
Happy to fill it.
Thank you. Okay. We're ready for number 9.
Number 9, zoning ordinance text amendments regarding medical marijuana. Bill number 7386, ordinance number 9183.
Mr. Eric.
Thank you, sir. I'll call on the Community Development Director, Sarah Copeland.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. On February 5th, we had a work session to discuss proposed zoning ordinance text amendments regarding medical marijuana in response to the approval of Amendment 2 last November. We have been watching draft regulations coming out from the state with regards to the new medical marijuana uses that are now authorized, and also thinking about what we needed to do here in North Kansas City to regulate those new uses. And the ordinance before you tonight would codify all of that, basically what we discussed on February 5th. And just to review what these ordinances, or what these amendments would allow, it would allow medical marijuana dispensaries as a permitted use in the C3, M1, and M2 zoning districts, and cultivation, infused products manufacturing, and testing facilities as permitted uses in the M1 and M2 zoning districts. Those appear most compatible with those types of uses, and that does cover most of the city. Our M1 and M2 zoning districts make up about 60% of North Kansas City's land use. We do establish new buffer distances for these uses. Amendment 2 establishes a 1,000-foot buffer for marijuana-related facilities from schools, childcare centers, and churches unless local governments adopt some other buffer distance. What we are proposing here is a buffer of 300 feet, which is the same buffer we apply to liquor licenses, and it also defines how we would measure that buffer distance from the exterior wall of the building containing the church, daycare, or school to the exterior property line that contains the medical marijuana use. The other item I would point out is that we also are modifying the definition of church we're adding 2 words, primarily used. So a church is a building primarily used for public religious worship and associated religious functions. We wanted to clarify because we do have some cases here where churches rent an event facility for their worship, that's not considered a church if it's not primarily used for religious worship. We're also adopting some specific use standards for medical marijuana uses, that all operations and storage must be contained in a fully enclosed building, so there's no outside storage permitted. No marijuana may be consumed on the premises of these businesses. Hours of operation are restricted to 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. and persons who are not employees cannot be on the premises between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. State licenses must be prominently displayed to the public. No marijuana-related businesses may be located in a building that contains a residence. Ventilation systems must be installed to prevent odors from leaving the premises, and we are going to require site plan review. Normally, for example, for an industrial building where you have one industrial use move out and another move in, we wouldn't require site plan review. In this case, we do think it's appropriate because there are some different use standards that we'd like to adopt, but also different standards in place from the state. The city or the Planning Commission did hold the required public hearing for these amendments last Thursday. Unfortunately, no one appeared to speak at the hearing, but the Planning Commission did vote unanimously to recommend approval to you. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Have you had a chance to go over some of the draft guidelines that just came out from the state?
I have. I mean, I don't know when they came out. We looked at them on Monday, so we've reviewed them a little bit.
It looked like some of the buffer distance rules looked a little bit different than what ours.
Right, they did finally, in those rules, define how they would measure that, but because our buffer is less, I believe that this would control.
Okay. Got it. I believe that was the only one I remember noticing that at least came up tonight.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Just say that again on the buffer zone.
The buffer in Amendment 2 is 1,000 feet.
Right.
And they did not specify how the 1,000 feet would be measured. The rules that have come out now have established how they would measure that 1,000-foot buffer distance. I believe that because we have defined it as 300 feet and have a slightly different way of measuring it, that because this is less, that this is the distance that would control what that distance is for our local regulations.
Reading.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
An ordinance amending Title 17 zoning ordinance of the Code of the City of North Kansas City, Missouri regarding medical marijuana.
I move that bill number 7386 be placed on second and final reading and passes ordinance number 9183.
Call a roll.
Who was the second?
Bill did it.
Bill.
Okay. Councilmember Stefan?
No.
Councilmember Farr?
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong?
Yes.
Councilmember Pierce?
Yes.
Councilmember Sanders?
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Clevenger?
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yes.
An ordinance amending Title 17 zoning ordinance of the Code of the City of North Kansas City, Missouri regarding medical marijuana.
Number 10.
Budget amendment, accounting and billing software, resolution number 19-015.
Eric?
Thank you, sir. We have a budget amendment before you for accounting and billing software. The rationale and the explanation for it is a little bit convoluted, so I would like to go into it in a little bit of detail. So the story of this project actually begins in 2016 when Tyler Technologies, which owns the Encode product that we use for our accounting and billing software as well as other uses, provided an estimate for an upgrade to Encode 10 in the amount of $40,000. Now, when they provided this estimate 3 years ago, they did not indicate at that time that there were costs that were not included in that proposal. They did indicate to us back at that time that there'd be a long wait time before they would have staff available to perform the upgrade, so we asked to be put on their waiting list, and they did that. In the meantime, in the 2 years in between, work on Energov, which is also a Tyler product, which is part of the Encode product line, was installed in community development according to a written proposal from Tyler that included an estimate of all costs, including travel and an hourly rate for any additional time that would be necessary to install the product. And that was successful, and we did not go over budget. Work eventually proceeded in late 2018 on the Encode 10 upgrade, without a written proposal ever being provided to or accepted by the city. I've looked extensively at the history on this. It appears that Tyler assumed that the city understood that this would be proceeding under the same terms as the work that it had performed for community development on the city's Energov software, but city staff involved in this conversion did not have that understanding. We had still that same amount budgeted. I think Tyler bears some culpability for not proceeding with a written proposal for this work. On the other hand, city staff also, I believe, does bear some culpability for allowing it to proceed on such an informal basis. I think just the length of time that had passed occurred that when they finally said we're ready to go, we said, fine, let's go. And we didn't take all the steps in that case that we should have, and that resulted in a misunderstanding. So that when we did receive the final bill from Encode in February of this year, it contained over $10,000 in travel, lodging, and additional personnel hours. And that increased the city's total cost for this upgrade to $53,733.70, which was almost $14,000 more than we had budgeted. So when we got this, we contacted Tyler and we said, what's going on here? And it was at that point that we discovered the error, and we explained to them that we felt this hadn't, we recognized that we had allowed things to proceed on too informal basis, but we also felt that they had. And they offered to credit the city about $7,000, $6,902.39 of these costs. We appreciate that gesture. We do think that's a fair settlement of the difference that we have on this matter. In addition to paying for that resulting overage, we're recommending 2 additional upgrades. One is for a new module that would facilitate issuing emailed utility bills directly to residential or business customers. They'd be sent automatically as part of our billing process if we installed this. Currently, emailed utility bills are done manually and individually. Accounting staff frequently receive requests for emailed bills, but it's just very clunky for us to do it at this point, but this would allow for that. Also, we had already budgeted for this year business licensing software at the amount of $35,000, but as a result of the misunderstanding that we had on the previous work, we now understand that we need to add an amount for travel and other auxiliary costs, and that would increase the total cost for this work to $37,940. So as a result of those 3 things, we now have before you a requested budget amendment of the amount of $16,271. If you have any additional questions, I or Shirley Land, our finance manager, will be happy to try to answer them.
I have one question,
Yes,
Eric. With the email bills, will there be an ability for citizens to auto pay? We'll be able to sync our accounts with the email bill, so it's just taken out?
Is this on? Yeah. I don't believe so. I think it's just, you would get the bill and then pay on the city's website like you currently can now.
Might be something to look at in the future. Not right
I'll
now.
ask.
Well, we're already paying a whole lot more money for it, but I'm just saying somewhere down the line.
I don't think they offer it at this point.
Okay, thank you.
I see no problem with approval of the resolution, since there's culpability on both sides and it's kind of a muddy situation. We need the software, we need the updates and all of that, so let's just move forward with it.
I agree.
Second that.
Second? Will you second? You first. Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Number 11, side letter with IAFF Local Number 42, Paramedic and Training Pay Schedule, Resolution Number 19-014.
Mr. Wright.
Thanks, sir. I'll call on the Fire Chief, Dave Hargis.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. What's before you tonight is hopefully a resolution to some of our issues. Right now, regionally and nationally in the fire service, paramedics are becoming a very rare commodity. We've had difficulty in recruiting them for about the past 2 years. We've had some retention issues because there are other jurisdictions that pay considerably higher than we do for that rate. And the only alternative we have right now is we're fully staffed is to get people that have already worked for us to go to paramedic school. We pay for their tuition for their class in full, but we require them to go to class and do all their clinicals on their off time. We don't compensate them for any of that. And the clinical hours alone is 660 hours of clinical hours. And what the staff has put together for you tonight is a way to kind of incentivize and reward some of these people that are going to class. And that would be after their first year of paramedic school where they're invested and they've shown they're going to put in the time and effort, that we move them to a pay scale above what they're normally making but less than what they'll be promoted to as a paramedic. And so we just saw that as kind of an incentive and a reward also for our internal people to get them to get that extra certification. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Move to approve.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 12.
Budget amendment for Regional Radio Support Services, Resolution Number 19-016.
Mary?
Thanks, sir. I'd like to call on the Police Chief, Steve Beamer.
Thank you, sir. The issue at hand here involves the city's public safety radios and their interoperability with the Metropolitan Area Regional Radio System, which is commonly known as MARS. The MARS system is what all the police, fire, and public works radios operate on, not only in this city but across the metropolitan area. The infrastructure, the towers, and the computer network that allows all the radios to connect to each other in the dispatch centers is managed by the City of Kansas City, Missouri. The City of Kansas City charges a per radio fee for every unit that's on the MARS system to help support that infrastructure. They bill us annually for that. The funds for the city's funds to pay that are in the police department budget. Last fiscal year, they didn't bill us. I don't know what happened to Kansas City, but it slipped through their cracks. They recognized this about a month ago and called us up and go, "Did you pay us?" And we said, "No." And so they said, "Well, we're going to fix that." So they invoiced us not only for last year, but for this year as well. The funds in last year's budget went back to the fund reserve. We did not spend those on something else. That money just went back to the fund reserve. So what we need now is to reappropriate the money that we didn't spend last year into this year's budget so we can pay last year and this year all at once. That's the resolution.
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Question?
He's got a question.
Sorry.
Yeah, move to approve and we second, but I got a question. Is this, this wasn't a result of when we changed over to the fire dispatching over to Kansas City, is it?
No, this is an entirely separate issue.
That's okay. That's what I wanted. Thank you.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Number 13, Electric Vehicle Charging Station Site License Agreement, Bill Number 7387, Ordinance Number 9184.
Eric.
Thank you, sir. Several months ago, at the suggestion of a resident, staff contacted Kansas City Power and Light to discuss the installation of an electric vehicle charging station in Mackin Park. Each station would be comprised of 3 charging units that would take up a total of 6 parking spaces. The Parks Director, Kelly Vatipka, and I met with KCP and rail representatives on site. We looked at a number of possibilities, arrived at the best, one being at the southeast corner of Mackin Park. Kelly consulted the Parks Board, which is amenable to a charging station being placed there. I also discussed this with the city council during a staff comment at a subsequent council meeting, and you indicated your assent, and based upon that assent, we then proceeded to develop a site license agreement with KCP&L. So the next step in order to have this station installed is to enter into this site license agreement. It provides, in essence, that KCP&L will install and maintain the charging station at its expense for a 10-year period. So at this point, it's before you for your approval. We do recommend approval of the site license.
I got a question. Bill? I'm all in favor of that. It's a good idea, but does anybody know how many stations we have in the city limits of North Kansas City? How many charging stations do we have, and where are they?
I am not aware. There might be some on private property. I'm not aware of any others in the city.
This is it. I thought there was some.
That may be. I'm just not sure.
The Architect off Armor Road, I believe there's some behind their building.
We need to, I mean, I agree this is something that should be done, but I think the city should know what they have on there in the municipality area, so we should find out how many there are and where they are.
We'll do our best to find out.
There's really no cost to the city involved in this, is there?
No, sir.
What about the electricity? We're gonna
That will be paid for by customers.
Oh, by the customers?
Yes,
So
sir.
we're not gonna pay? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Would that be a credit card type thing, or?
Yes, sir, that's right.
First reading.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
An ordinance adopting and approving a license agreement by and between the City of North Kansas City, Missouri and Kansas City Power and Light Company regarding the installation, operation, and maintenance of electric vehicle charging stations in Mackin Park in the city.
Move bill number 7387 be placed on second and final reading and passes ordinance number 9184.
Second.
Call a roll.
Councilmember Steffen?
Yes.
Councilmember Farr?
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong?
Yes.
Councilmember Pierce?
Yes.
Councilmember Sanders?
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Clevenger?
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yes.
An ordinance adopting and approving a license agreement by and between the City of North Kansas City, Missouri and Kansas City Power and Light Company regarding the installation, operation, and maintenance of electric vehicle charging stations in Mackin Park in the city.
Number 14.
Appointment of municipal judge, Bill number 7385, ordinance number 9182.
Eric?
Thank you, sir. I'll call on City Councilor Tom Barzee.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, this evening before you is an ordinance that, if approved, would reappoint Judge Fuller for 2 more years. Unlike some positions by the state constitution as well as state law, the position of municipal judge in cities that have them requires that it be for a term of office, and that term must be no less than 2 years. Our city ordinance, as far back as I can remember, has always required that it be 2 years, and so before you is approval. It's for the same amount of money as he earned prior years. However, in front of you also is a sheet that looks like this, that from what was sent out, language that would have made him an independent contractor of the city. That, when it went out on Friday, that was the best guess per me meeting with Casey and talking to our HR outside legal counsel, that it probably would be an independent contractor. However, she indicated in our conference call that she would get to it, needed to talk to some additional people in a different department in their firm, and it came back that they believe that it could create some problems, and they said, and they started to get in a more detailed discussion, and I said, that's not worth it. If it's going to create a problem, we'll just leave him as an employee as he has always been. So if approved tonight, and what Judge Fuller has signed is this, what this language has stricken out. All the rest of it is identical. It was just Section 8 that has been stricken from the agreement. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them for you.
So is he gonna be the contractor or the employee of the city?
He will be a part-time employee of the
Part-time
city.
employee. Okay.
First reading. Oh, go ahead, Bill, I'm sorry.
I just wondered why we needed to do this in the first place.
Because
what's the rationale or logic?
The rationale was, it came from me candidly, is that's how we treat most other professionals that deal with the city. Secondly, when you go through all the language in the state constitution that deals with the municipal judge, as well as statutes that deal with them, but I don't have tax expertise, candidly, it would point that they should be. And I will add this. Many municipalities across this country that do not have a full-time judge, they treat them just as this. I reviewed a number of other contracts, meaning as an independent contractor. But I didn't feel like it was worth it to have a potential dispute with the IRS or whatever, the Department of Labor, over something that was not that big of a deal. So that's the genesis of how this even came about. And Steve, I might add, Judge Fuller was fine with him being an independent contractor. He didn't have any issues at all.
All right, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Sure.
I just, I wanted to mention that, I can remember way back into the 70s, and I think we're very fortunate to have a good judge that we have today. I remember we had a judge at one time, and he did his best, and he was, as fair as he could be. I don't want to say bad things about him, but I don't even know if he went to college. Seriously. He was retired from the railroad as a railroad agent. So I think we're very fortunate to have the municipal judge we have today, and also should consider in the future possibly increasing his wages.
Just to answer that one last part, Councilman, a year ago we did 2 years ago we did just that. They had not been raised in a number of years, and it was brought before the council, and he got a fairly substantial raise. In fact, I believe he talked to you about that as well, and he was very satisfied when he talked to me about the amount of money he was being paid.
Yes, and this time around, I asked him if he was willing to be re-upped for another contract on the same terms, and he said yes.
First reading.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
An ordinance approving appointment of Stephen R. Fuller as municipal judge and adopting a contract by and between the City of North Kansas City, Missouri and Stephen R. Fuller for professional legal services to serve as municipal judge of the city.
I move that bill number 7385 be placed on second and final reading and passes ordinance number 9182.
Second.
Call roll.
Councilmember Steffen?
Yes.
Councilmember Farr?
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong?
Yes.
Councilmember Pierce?
Yes.
Councilmember Sanders?
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Clevenger?
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yes.
An ordinance approving appointment of Stephen R. Fuller as municipal judge and adopting a contract by and between the City of North Kansas City, Missouri and Stephen R. Fuller for professional legal services to serve as municipal judge of the city.
Number 15.
Approving accounts due and payable by the city through March 15th, 2019. Bill number 7838, ordinance number 9185.
First reading.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
An ordinance authorizing payment for certain accounts due and payable by the city through March 15th, 2019.
I move that bill number 7838 be placed on second and final reading and passes ordinance number 9185.
Second. Call roll.
Councilmember Steffen?
Yes.
Councilmember Farr?
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember DeLong?
Yes.
Councilmember Pierce?
Yes.
Councilmember Sanders?
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Clevenger?
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yes.
An ordinance authorizing payment for certain accounts due and payable by the city through March 15th, 2019.
Mr. Eric.
Thank you, sir. I'll call on Chief Hargis.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. Everybody's been seeing the news with the flooding going on around the the state and the Missouri River. I actually had a phone call from a citizen today asking, they thought the water was getting ready to overtop our levees. So I just kind of wanted to give everybody an update. They issued the warning a couple of weeks ago. We knew the water was coming. However, they've lowered the estimates for the peak. It was supposed to have been today at 33 feet, which is minor flood stage, which historically would get the water to the bottom of the levee at the toe of the levee. I went down and drove the levee today. It's not out of the banks at any point along our city limits. And they're expecting it to crest on Friday at 31 feet, which is well below any actionable thing that we need to do here. So, and it's predicted to go down significantly after that. So we should have no long-term or immediate flood concerns at all in North Kansas City at this time. I just want to make everybody aware of that. But we are keeping track of it. We have notified the homeless community that lives down there that there is a possibility they could have some water there. I spoke to some of them again today. They weren't real concerned about it, but they are aware. So I just wanted to make everybody aware that we have no major flood concerns. This is a short-term flood. It's not long-term like 93. So that we should have no problems at all.
It's good to know, Chief, because I had an individual that lives on the 3rd floor of my apartment complex that was concerned. Like,
we'll be nice to them, and that way you'll have some place above the water line.
I'm not sure if they were in tongue-in-cheek, but I'll pass that on.
Okay.
3rd floor.
Also, I'd like to inject that, there's a lot about information about the flooding in the various states on the news right now. It's national news, and I think 4 people have been killed, and so it's nice to hear. Hopefully, we're going to be all right on this flooding situation. There's towns in Missouri that pretty much most of the town of these places, small towns, have been wiped out. Through Missouri, Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota. It's nice to hear. Thanks.
Thank you, Chief. I'd like to call on the Public Works Director, Pat Hoover.
In front of you is the 2019 infrastructure report card. This is the second edition of it. We started with this last year. The report evaluates conditions of various aspects of utilities and streets. It's especially valuable to the staff to review so we can prioritize, plan, and budget for needed improvements. Last year we did a extensive inspection of the street conditions and came up with, and it's in the report, grades for each block of each street in the whole city. That we forwarded to the road district, and I think it helps them prioritize some of their projects. Recently, staff's prepared large maps, and they're going to be they include sidewalks, curbs, conditions of all curbs, all sidewalks, handicap ramps. By the end of summer, report on the condition of catch basins will be included. These are large maps. They won't be attached to this, but they're really for staff review and to help us grade them. So getting to the grade card, they're pretty much the same grades as last year. It takes a lot to make say you have 45 miles of sewers. I mean, big improvements still aren't going to change the grade, probably. So the only thing that went up were trees, city-owned trees. It went from a B to a B plus. I'm sorry, from B minus to a B. And the reason for that is this is our 5th year in the Emerald Ash Borer Plan, where we have taken out over 200 trees over the last 5 years that were infested, and we've treated the others. And so that brought us up to a B. It was a little bit surprising that the street condition report didn't go up from C plus. Staff thought it was going to go up because they had they rebuilt, they renovated East 16th Avenue from Lynn all the way to Burlington, and they did extensive micropaving projects. But at the same time last year, we had a lot of deterioration of streets, particularly in the PID, Bedford, and other places. It was just a bad year for streets to deteriorate. And by the way, this winter, we're really having problems with streets that will be in front of us. So that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, we just presented it tonight, so I don't know if you have any questions, but if you do, I'll be glad to answer them.
Kind of off that one a little bit, but did we not already approve work around the fire station where the concrete's really bad? Did we not approve work for that last year?
Around the fire station?
Or the police station?
Yes, sir, we did.
Yeah.
We're looking at doing that in the spring.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you, Pat. And I would just note that we have several reports in your packet, upcoming city items to note in the YMC monthly financial report for January and February for your review. That's all we have, sir. Thank you.
Where did I get your first?
Well, I'd like to thank the police department, fire department, and Public Works for helping to make Snake Saturday a success. And special congratulations to the successful role played as the Grand Marshal on Snake Saturday by our police chief, Sam Reamer. And I hope, from what I hear, I hope things work out at Clay County on the issues of staffing in the assessor's office. And I want to express appreciation to Officer McNamee and Major Freeman for their classroom discussions at the North Kansas City High School on policing in America with the students. I hear that was it was a successful thing, and I would think it would be. And I think that's something part of the education those students should at least be exposed to. And congratulations to our municipal court administrator, Perry, on her certificate of appreciation from the Western Missouri Association of Court Administrators. And lastly, I'd like to mention, if we consider doing improvements to the Mackin Park Diamond 1 baseball field, it's a baseball field out there, I would like us to also consider placing 2 or 3 batting cages in there. Now, there's a cost on that, but for location, they can be in there. But if you have those batting cages, we could charge a fee. And I don't know if they'll pay for themselves, but then I don't know that they won't pay for themselves. So we could recoup at least part of the money, and there is the possibility of even making a profit from the batting cages, and that would be a good place for them, right there by Mackin Park baseball fields. And there's locations that we could put those in. I'm talking about 2 or 3 batting cages. Batting cages more difficult to find than they used to be. It seems like that to me, anyway. You almost have to go out to Lenexa or someplace. And that's all I had. Thank you.
Nothing tonight, sir.
We were discussing it earlier, but I too want to go ahead and congratulate the North Kansas City girls basketball team on winning the Class 5 state championship. Not very often, generally you hear about us getting beat down by Jefferson City, so it's good for North Kansas City to finally get one over on Jefferson City. So that's good. Also, don't forget to vote on April 2nd. And also thank our police, fire, and public works, as well as the 8 outside agencies that helped coordinate and make Snake Saturday a successful and safe event. And That's all.
I would like to emphasize the fact that the Lady Hornets GPA was 3.49, and that 7 of the seniors are going to college as an educator myself, and the fact that they are champions of character. I'm all excited that they've won, but I think these 3 issues are particularly important, and I think they bring a lot of pride to the school district in general, and I'm awful proud of these girls. I know being an educator at UMKC and having student athletes in, to maintain a 3.49 with that kind of schedule that these athletes have to do, it's truly an accomplishment. And I know that from 14 years of working with athletes and seeing how hard they work to also maintain their grades. So these gals are something special.
Amen. Yeah. Congratulations to them. Well, they did a very good job. One of the girls is going to go to KU and play basketball.
I'm
so-
sorry about that.
Oh, you're sorry about that. Good thing there's a chair between us.
That's right. You're wearing MU colors.
They did a wonderful job, and I wish the boys' basketball team could perform as well. Maybe they will one of these days. I know one time they had Bud Lathrop's son doing some basketball coaching at the school, and I had always hoped that he would get the job as a head coach down there, but he didn't do it. I think he wound up in Northgate or something teaching up there. But congratulations to him, and thanks for the work with the EMTs and the paramedics. They're down there at our place a great deal of the time. You can't have too many EMTs and paramedics in the world. There should be more of them, and maybe we will see to it that we can keep the ones we have and get some new ones. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Couple of things, just to echo the comments on the Lady Hornets, that's fantastic. You know, the boys' football team had a good year this year, and the Lady Hornets won a state championship, so I'm happy for them. I also am happy that Stephen Fuller, or the judge, is re-upping for municipal judge for another couple of years. I think he does good work for our city, and glad to have him. You know, I missed the Snake Saturday parade. I happened to be in New York, and their parade, they had a parade on the 16th. Wasn't near as big as the one here in Kansas City. I told them that. But I'm sure the parade was great, and I appreciate all the public safety police officers and we're out there working it. And the only other thing is tonight we didn't have a work session, which kind of worked out because I've always been invited to Life Unlimited. They have a group called People First. It's a group of disabled individuals that meet together to advocate for themselves and have activities and things like that. So I attended their meeting at 6 tonight. Didn't stay for it all because I had to come here. But they're interested in, you know, volunteering in the city. And one thing that they wanted to do, and I don't know if other groups do this, is adopt a road or something like that to clean up. Like they mentioned Swift, like kind of from Marmor Road down, you know, kind of in the, what do we call that, entertainment district, what have you. So who would they contact about doing that? Would that be Public Works, or would that be?
They could start with me, sir, and then we'll try to work that out.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, I'll give them your information and have them contact you. And that's it.
Nothing for me. Thank you. Okay, my turn. At least Snake Saturday, the Snake Parade Committee and everything, they gave us a plaque and a ribbon, so, I mean, it's money well spent. That's all I got. Thank you.
Nothing to read there, Mayor?
No.
Uh-huh.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Aye.